Hello everybody, I'm back today with another video. This is going to be another one of those voiceover videos where I'm talking about the game after I've played it. I actually played this game about 3 weeks ago. It was the first round of the PROladder tournament. It was against vspy13, Silver Marshall, 488 ELO, about 2,000 games, and a 51% ratio. So I actually went with this new setup here, which you can see on my channel in the ranked game against Spion. I like to advance early on the right side, and usually if he counter advances on that side, I will retreat. I like to not reveal the general for anything lower than a major, simply because the general is kind of out of place, but I especially like the surprising marshal position of the setup. I've had several generals actually attack the marshal, but the spy is in a good location so that it can guard both the general and the colonel, and the flag is well guarded behind the lake. So I think it's a pretty solid setup, and it's got some unpredictable locations. Usually I would use this against higher ranked players. I've actually used it in ranked games recently, and it's brought me to about 800 ELO. I'm 799 actually as of this recording. But it's more unexpected, so some platinum players that use intuition struggle with trying to guess the piecement of places, which I like a lot. Anyway, so as you can see, for this game I started to advance on the right side, but I retreated as soon as he began to advance, simply because that's not really the side that I am really fit to be advancing on, simply because I don't want the general to be discovered. So in that situation, I was wary to hit that piece because I thought it might be a captain, because he had discovered that lieutenant. But usually once I stop advancing on the right side, I will advance on the left, and there's actually reasons for that. Most people expect the side that you first advance on to be the marshal side, so by advancing on the right side first, it might implant that in my opponent's head that they'll think that. And then that can deceive them as to the marshal placement later in the game. So in that situation, I wanted to go ahead and bring that scout out because I didn't want to make the general location obvious by keeping my major there, then he would suspect something. So I tried to kind of make an act of moving the major over and back and keeping that scout there to kind of guard the general, because lower ranked players will use their scouts pretty quickly in the beginning game. They don't value them as much, so I don't want to totally leave the general uncovered there. But in that situation, I'm fine with doing that, because that seems pretty unsuspect. I think that there's a good piece there, because I'm guarding it with an unknown that's acting like a scout that it is, and a lieutenant there. So I'm going to go ahead and advance on the left side now that we've kind of stalled out on the right. So I discover a sergeant there, and he scouts my sergeant right there. And we're actually going to trade sergeants here. And I didn't like that move there because my marshal was exposed, and like I just said earlier, I usually don't like to keep my marshal or general exposed against lower ranked players when I use this setup, simply because they like to use scouts very often. And he very well might have plunged a scout there and found that marshal, and that would have made the game a lot more difficult to win if he had done that. So I retreat back with the captain there. I'm not sure if that was the best decision, because it seemed that this piece was not necessarily a very good piece. He just moved it out. He double scouted that lieutenant over here. He had previously, my lieutenant took one of his scouts, and I believe that was the first casualty of the game. So that was a memory error by him. So at that point I knew he didn't have a very strong memory. So I was able to determine that. So this move by him is interesting because he knows the lieutenant guards that. And I'm actually not going to take the captain here. I'm just going to act like I'm running away with my lieutenant. Like I said, I prefer to reveal my general for a major or more, but not a captain. I don't think a captain is quite worth it, in my opinion. Simply because the general is kind of out of position in the setup if I need to move him into the center or on the left side quickly. And by not taking the captain there, he might think it's okay to move a major or colonel in the same spot here later in the game, and I might be able to get a more valuable pickup. And that does indeed pay off later in the game, as you'll see, not taking that captain. So he chases the lieutenant some more, but I'm just going to keep it there like I'm scared of the captain. So on this left side, I'm going to scout this piece right here. It's going to be a lieutenant. Like I said, I don't think retreating the captain is necessarily a good decision because if it's the side opposite of the side he's advancing on, which is likely the marshal side, especially for silver players, usually kind of predictable in that manner, then it's probably going to be more of the junk side, or at least not as powerful pieces. So probably advancing the captain on that piece without using a scout would have been better if I'd used intuition there. That's okay. And on this right side, I think he does an interesting move there. I was actually expecting him to take the lieutenant with his captain, and I would take it with the major, but he ended up just retreating with that back piece right there. I think in that situation, that minor there would have been a sufficient bluff for a general, and I don't think he would have taken it if that had been a colonel. So on the left side here, he moved this lieutenant back into his setup. And I don't think that was a good move because that allows my scout to move. And at this point, I think it's very obvious that's a bluff. But he does nothing about it, and he lets me to scout that piece and ends up being a colonel, which is good info for a scout for sure. But I think in that situation, it would have been better to take that piece, because the worst case scenario is you discover, say, a major or a colonel, and then you advance on both the captain and that piece that you discovered with the lieutenant, and you would probably take at least one of those with your colonel, meaning a more valuable pickup. And if it's a bluff, then you take it, like if he had attacked a scout like it was a bluff, then you gotten a free scout, and if I'd hit the lieutenant with the captain, then you would have gotten it with the colonel. So I don't understand that move by him. But it gave me good information regardless. Now take note of this piece right here that he just moved back. This piece originated from right here, and it's guarding the colonel here. And I'm inclined to think this is the marshal side, and this could be a bluff, but it's guarding the colonel pretty intently here. But I know from a previous experience playing this player, actually, I played vspy13 on my second episode of the Road to Platinum series, which you can see on my channel. It was a very close game, so I was expecting a very close game here. But what I learned from that game is that he doesn't bluff a whole lot when he's defending his pieces. So if this is the marshal side over here, then what is this piece that's defending the colonel? It'd be logical that it would be the spy. So that's what I'm thinking at this point, is that that's the spy. But that's just a guess that I can make off of intuition and prior knowledge of playing this player, and that's an advantage. So we're going to trade captains there. I think that was an interesting move by him, especially because that could have been, say, a major. He hadn't discovered that captain. But nevertheless, I go ahead and I bring another captain up on the left side. So that move there is I want to keep covering my general. I don't want a useless or a low-ranked piece to discover it, but I don't want to make it too obvious that I'm camping pieces in front of my general either. That's why I left it open when his captain there was sitting in front of the gen. Because I can't make it too obvious, or else that'll be bad. So he used another scout on that lieutenant. If I can, like I said, lower-ranked players usually don't value their scouts as much, so if I can keep getting him to use his scouts, then that's definitely positive for me. Because my general marshal, which are prone to being scouted, will be safe, especially because they're in open lanes. But on this left side here, I go ahead and I take the lieutenant, and then he's actually going to move the colonel to the left there. I think that was an interesting move. So I press on and I discover here the general. So that definitely reinforces, so I'm probably certain that this is the spy at this point, because I know he doesn't bluff a lot. And what else is going to be guarding the colonel and the general that's practical? The spy. It's going to be the spy here. And take note that this general originated from this spot right here, colonel from here, and spy here. So these are both where they originated. And that'd be a perfectly logical position, especially for a silver player, for general in the center that can go to the side if needed, as he did here, with the spy guarding the colonel. So that makes perfect sense. So at this point, I'm very confident in my assessment that that's the spy over there. And I got valuable info for a captain and a scout to discover his general and his colonel. And discovering his general over here only reinforces my thinking that this is the marshal side. Because marshal and general being on the same side is very unlikely, because he prefers more balanced setups from prior experience playing this guy. So he advances on that lieutenant. I'm just going to retreat it. I don't want to necessarily sacrifice it and then maybe risk his last scout to find that general. So I'm going to move that major up, act like that minor is a general bluff there. So the major will be safe. So over here, I'm pretending like this marshal's a bluff. I'm trying to like keep the 2-square rule in the kernel. I'm trying to do everything I can to make him think that it's a bluff. And it works. Either he thought that was a bluff, which is likely because it came from here, or he thought it was the general trying to pick up a free kernel, if it could get past the general here. But either way, it would be more probable if he thought it was a bluff coming from second row behind the lane. So I definitely understand his motive there, but that tricky marshal placement worked for me there. So in this situation, I'm thinking that the kernel, since it's threatening the major, so I go ahead and I move the scout up to defend it and act like a general bluff. But at this point, that marshal, that general attacking my marshal is a very pivotal point in this game. So I'm going to go ahead and advance with my kernel because I know his marshal's probably prone to being on the other side of the board. And while I'm doing this, I take note of this piece moving out. And the kernel I know is here and the spy here. I do that just out of safety because I don't want to risk the marshal even if I know that the spy is right here. And again, this piece came from right here on my right side here. And it would make perfect sense it's a marshal if I'm advancing on his pieces. And there I signaled that this is the spy. That was the piece that was guarding the general. But I'm thinking that this is the marshal. Since he started to move it out and it came from the right side of the board as soon as I began to advance with my kernel. So I continue to advance with my kernel. He's going to threaten that known lieutenant. I'm just going to go ahead and retreat that back. I'm not going to necessarily deal with that because I don't think that's very important. But over here on this left side, he has a blockade of pieces. Now notice the spy moving out. This piece moving in, the spy will move out again, and he'll move the marshal down to cover both pieces, like that. So at this point, I know this is the spy. I signal that I know this is the marshal right here. So I'm safe with both my kernel and my marshal having almost sure knowledge of his marshal and spy. And right there, he used his last scout, which I suppose was justified, but it wasn't my general or my spy. So my general, my spy are safe from being scouted at that point, which is good for me. So at this point, since I'm so confident of the marshal, suppose I could have done this without wasting that lieutenant, but it worked regardless. But I'm extremely confident that that is the marshal that's over here. And I know this is the spy right here. I'm just going to move that back out of safety, even though I know that's the spy. And I'm going to move that kernel to threaten those pieces. He's going to move the marshal over, which only reinforces my thinking that that's the marshal. So I'm going to advance with my general on this kernel here. And I have the 2-square rule advantage on him. And so my decision here, I'm going to take this kernel right here. And my decision here, my thinking is, if the marshal is right here behind the kernel, then I trade being a general up for a kernel up, and my kernel can rampage into these pieces. And as the marshal was not there because I was correct in my assessment, then I have a free kernel regardless. So that was a win-win for sure there. But I go ahead and I sandwich this piece with my major free captain, so that's good. I'm not down a captain anymore. But at this point, the game is really starting to get out of hand for him. And I'm actually going to advance on these pieces just because now I know that this is the marshal. So all these moved pieces here I'm going to start taking. And I'm actually going to begin to charge in the center. So right here I'm going to move, I'm going to try to take that piece with the major there. We're going to go ahead and trade majors. I was pretty certain that was a major since it was trying to actively go toward my major. At this point I'm up quite a bit and it's only going to get worse for him. So the spy is next to his marshal right here. Of course I'm keeping track of that, and the unknown marshal, which I'm very confident. And then of course another captain for me here, so my lead is just expanding right here. and I'm able to take that captain. He tries to bluff that. I'm not having any of that. I take that. That's a sergeant. I'm so confident of his marshal at this point that those types of bluffs are just totally fruitless. But he moves up with the spy, and he moves over with the marshal. And actually here I start to bring out a scout. I move the major over, and I'm actually going to bring out a scout and try to scout that spy. But he moves it away before I can begin to do that. So I go ahead and I move to threaten that piece, which I know is not the marshal. And right here, he's actually going to try to bring in a bluff, which I don't understand this bluff at all. It was a really bad bluff, honestly. He brings, I believe it's this piece out right here to act as a bluff. Yeah, that piece. And that doesn't make any sense because the colonel came from right here, and I attacked this piece that came from right here that was a lieutenant. So I took the colonel here, and then I moved over 2 more and took the lieutenant. So I know that's not the marshal, and it's just another free piece that he's trying to feed me to make me think that that just reinforces that this is the marshal. And he makes a mistake right here by moving up, because now I can smash my general into these pieces and take at least one of them. So I go ahead and I pick up another captain there, and he escapes with the spy. At this point, the marshal and his spy has only moved pieces. So I go ahead and I bring the scout up, and I take his spy right here. This is almost an insult to injury here. The unknown spy. But I take it, and he takes it with his minor. But at this point, this is pretty much GG. He has nothing else that he can do. So at this point, I'm going to start advancing on the right, just to progress the game. I don't want to advance with my spy yet, because I want to trade off majors before I do that. So I'm going to use my scouts and try to find his majors with my general. But in this period, he takes a little break to think and see if there's anything he can do to salvage the game. But at this point, it's way out of control for him. My success was dictated by the fact that I guessed his marshal and his spy, and I definitely used that to my advantage and took a lot of pieces with my general here. So he moves over with the marshal to threaten the colonel. I'm just going to go ahead and move that back. I'm going to move the marshal and try to get him into place now that the spy is gone. And I'm going to bring a sergeant up to collect the free minor that he's offering me here. But now I'm going to go ahead and I move my scouts. So go ahead and check that. I'm hoping to find majors here, because if I can get rid of his majors, then he has nothing higher than lieutenant, and I have total free reign over the board. But here I recognize he's trying to bring pieces down, and keep in mind this is the flag side, so I can't be but so apathetic about it. I don't understand that at all. I mean, he knows I'm going to have probably at least one of my 2 majors or one of my 2 captains there, so that was probably just a desperate attempt. I don't know why he didn't bring the major up sooner, but he's going to bring a major up on this left side, and he's going to trade with me. And at this point, I'm trying to find the flag somewhere. I'm thinking it's in the center, because his marshal came from here, and his general from here. So this would be a logical position for it. So I go ahead and I bring this minor up. He, on the other hand, is bringing a minor up on the other side. But my flag is heavily guarded, so that won't work. But he takes that with his major there, and at this point, that effectively seals the game. I don't know why he would do that. He should have let me try to explore somewhere else with it. But my only thinking is that perhaps this was the flag up here, this tripod, because my minor couldn't have gone this way because my colonel and my sergeant were blocking it, so it would only have been able to go this way. I would have probably taken the lieutenant and gotten the flag. But that seals the game. I type him GG after he loses the last major. He, on a last chance, brings down this minor, and I come in with my marshal. He moves down with the minor, so I move over with my marshal, and he does a move I don't understand at all. He moves over. I mean, his marshal's trapped at that point. So I just move down with that. He attacks with the minor on the lieutenant, and then we trade marshals, and that's game over. So with that, that's the true finale of the game. He surrenders at that point, having no movable piece higher than a sergeant, because this lieutenant's trapped. So I was very happy with this victory. Again, I've played him before, and it was a very close game. That was, yeah, episode 2 of my Road to Platinum series. But it was a very close game the first time I played him, so I was very happy that I was able to pretty much dominate this game. And I was very happy with my guesses and my intuition on his pieces, and especially that guess of the marshal and the rampage by my general. Picking up captains and a colonel is what led to my victory in this game. But good game, vspy13.